Just watch me now.
Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Welcome back to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin. Today, we have on Bryan McCabe. Bryan McCabe is a name, if you're a hockey fan, that you should know, especially from the 90s and early 2000s, where Bryan played over 1,100 NHL regular season games, 56 playoff games. He played for the New York Islanders, where he was drafted 40th overall, was their captain, named captain at 22 years old of that franchise. He got traded to Vancouver in a deal with Todd Bertuzzi for Trevor Linden, a really big trade. He was also part of the deal to Chicago that brought over the draft pick that allowed Brian Burke to select the Twins 2 and 3 in that year's draft. He was also a Toronto Maple Leaf, where he really blossomed as a player, stepped into his own, and from the 2000-2001 season all the way to the 2008-2009 season, was one of the top defensemen in the NHL. Right up there with the likes of Rob Niedermayer, Lidstrom, Zubov, all these names. Bryan was right there with goals, points, stats. He was an NHL All-Star during that period. He represented Canada at the Olympics. He has an unbelievable hockey resume, starting way back in junior, where I had the opportunity to play with him with the Chiefs, where he won back-to-back gold medals for Canada at the World Junior Championships, and won a gold medal at the World Championships as an NHLer. And we get right into all of that in this interview. Bryan is very, very transparent. He's very authentic. Talks about his time all over his hockey journey, but we really do spend quite a bit of time in Toronto, where he played his best hockey and also ironically got treated the worst by the fans there when he ended up leaving. And he gets really personal about what was going on in his personal life at that time, and we really get into the human aspect of the hockey player, being Bryan Berard, the guy, the man, the father. His journey to try to become a better leader and a better hockey player. And this is an awesome episode. I'm so thankful for Bryan for spending the time. Not to mention that Bryan is now the director of player development for the Florida Panthers. And we get into that, how his time in the game and who he learned from and mentored from and what he's thought to be right and how he's doing that now with prospects of the Panther organization to help them become Florida Panthers in the future. So this man is well worth listening to. I had a great time reconnecting with Bryan. We were good buddies back in the Spokane days, and it was awesome to reconnect with him here. So I know you're going to love this interview. There's so much good stuff in it. And without further ado, I bring you Bryan McCabe. All right. Welcome back to Up My Hockey. I believe this is episode 19, and we have a good friend and an old teammate for 3 years back in the day in Bryan McCabe. So, Caber, thank you so much for agreeing to do this and coming on today.
Anytime, buddy. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, man. It was like I think I found you from that email, the Toronto Maple Leafs alumni email list, and they do a pretty good job of all the teams I played on of like having that together. And I saw your name on there one time and threw a dart out there, and you ended up getting back to me, which is cool. And because we kept in touch. I don't know if you remember. I remember like kept keeping in touch a little bit when you were in the Isle. Mostly in the Isle, actually. When you were in the Islanders, we kept in touch those first few years, and then, I mean, just life happens and hockey happens and kind of lost contact. And I think it had to have been at least 10 years, if not more, since we'd chatted.
Yeah, you get traded to 5 different teams, you get new phone numbers, and all of a sudden you lose track of each other. But it's a pleasure to see you again, buddy.
Yeah, no, awesome. 100%. No, that's awesome. So, yeah, I want to get into your personal career, man. Like you said, 5 different trades.
all big market teams, from a 40th overall selection. Like, I want to kind of cover that, like your sort of highs, your lows, the things you saw, the people you played with. I think that's super relevant to my listeners and what's important to me with this podcast, and then get into what you're doing today, which is the director of player development for the Panthers, which is also super relevant because now you're helping young guys make that next step. And a lot of guys that are listening to this are trying to make that step, and whatever step that they're trying to go to. So I think you'll have a lot to offer here. So one thing that I saw there, Caber, when I looked, I didn't even know that you were born in St. Catharines. So when I was doing the kind of the homework for this, you're an Ontario boy that ends up playing in the WHL. Like, how did that happen in the first place?
So I was born, and we moved to Calgary, Alberta when I was about 6 months old. My dad got transferred. He worked for GE, like Gillivan International, like electrical stuff. And as soon as I was born, he got a better job in Calgary. So the family packed up, and, a lot of people see that. They think I played in the OHL, but, I was born in St. Catharines, but Calgary's my home, and that's how the WHL transpired.
Right. Yeah, 'cause I remember you from Calgary. I didn't remember anything from St. Catharines, but I guess that's just a birth certificate type thing. So, yeah, so we go WHL, you start off in Medicine Hat, and it's like crazy because you got traded in junior twice. It was almost like a telltale of what's going to happen in your career, because that's not, I mean, that's very rare to be traded twice in junior. I mean, how did that first trade feel, and how did that whole thing go that you remember?
It was shocking. The first trade, I was devastated. I went to Medicine Hat as a 16-year-old, had a really good rookie year, and was in my draft year as a 17-year-old. And our team wasn't doing as expected in Medicine Hat. And I was actually playing forward at the time, which was odd, back on forward. And I just remember getting a call in. It was a huge trade too. I think it was like 5 for 5, was it, or 4 for 4? Like 8 or 10 players involved in the trade. Never saw it coming, and basically had to pack my stuff and head to Spokane that night. And spent a lot of time there. Obviously played 2.5 years there with you in Spoke, and then obviously a lot of guys get traded their last year junior for the playoff stretch or whatever, and ended up finishing the career in Brandon and Memorial Cup run and all that stuff. But the bulk of my career was spent with you in Spoke, and they were great years for sure.
Right. So yeah, I mean, so it was like that. You had to leave that day. I know, like, we'll get into some of your NHL trades, and that was exactly what my NHL trade was like. I mean, I had to pack up in 2 hours or 3 hours, and I was on a plane and never to see that place again. The same thing at junior, hey?
Yeah, so we packed my stuff up. I remember it like it was yesterday. A guy by the name of Ole Jenstad put us in the back of his Supra and drove us, him, John Duval, who came in the trade with me, Scotty Townsend, who you obviously played with too. We piled in his car, and he drove me to my parents' house in Calgary, and we all spent the night at my parents' house, and we were on a 7 a.m. flight to Spoke the next day and played that night. It was a whirlwind, to say the least, at 17 years old, first trade ever, being so close to home in Medicine Hat, 2.5, 3 hours away. I'd see my family all the time, and now all of a sudden I'm going to another country. And,
right.
It seemed like I was going to Japan or something, for me, in my eyes at that age. But, once it all settled in, it's all in all, I think it worked out for the best.
Right. What did, maybe you should backtrack a little bit. How was that rookie year? So, I mean, playing at 16 in that league is not easy, and not many guys do it, so you were able to do it. You said you had a good year. Were you expecting to make that team in Medicine Hat that year? Was that sort of in the cards for you, or did you have to make that team coming out of camp?
That was my goal. I wouldn't say it was in the cards, but I would say I was probably penciled in. Funny thing is that, and a lot of people don't know this, but I was a forward my whole life until I was 15 years old. I've been a bulking centerman in Calgary, just, racking up points pretty good, but I was bigger than everyone, so it was more out of power and more than skill or skating. It was just that I was bigger and stronger than everyone. I could drop my leg wide and just score goals. But they used to have those tournaments in the summer, the Vancouver Super Series.
Yeah.
And they put these all-star teams together. And I played on this the Southern Alberta team. So the guys from Calgary, Red Deer, Airdrie, stuff like that. And one summer we didn't have any really good defensemen. So the coach said, "Can you play D for this tournament?" And I was like, "Okay, whatever. Whatever's good for the team." So I played D in this tournament, and the Medicine Hat scouts saw me play defense, and they came to me after the tournament and said, "You know what? We actually like you better as a defenseman. If you play defense next year your last year at Bantam, you'll have a good shot to make our team as a 16-year-old. So I went to training camp in Bantam, and you know how they line the guys up, you know, forwards at this end, D at this end. And I went to the end with the D. And the coach was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm playing D this year." He's like, "No, you're not." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm playing defense." Because the year before, I led like the league in scoring in Calgary as a forward. And the guy was like, "No way, you're not playing D." And I was like, "No, seriously, I'm going to play D this year." And I played D that year and never looked back. Made the team in Medicine Hat the next year. And we had an excellent team in Medicine Hat. Older team, you know, probably one of the top ranked teams in CHL all year. And, you know, I played as like the third pair D with a guy by the name of Evan Marble, who's actually a scout with the Panthers now. So
Yeah.
I've kept in contact with him, and he took me under his wing. And we had a great team. We were supposed to win it all. And we ended up getting swept in the first round by Swift Current. And then coach is fired, new coach the next year, traded, you know, everything, the chips all fell after that.
Sure. That's crazy. And I think that's a great message. I mean, so the way you tell it, it sounds like you were really willing to do that, make that switch. You mean, so you're a top line centerman, you know, crushing goals, and somebody asked you to play D and you're like, yeah, I'll go play D. Like, I don't think there's a lot of players right now, and parents get their hair in a knot and everything else if a coach ever asks a guy to move and have a kid be uncomfortable. But were you really that willing at the time to just give it a whirl? Is that the way you remember it?
Yeah, you know what? I just wanted to make, at that point in time, the WHL as a 16-year-old. And whatever it was going to take to get me there, because that was the next stepping stone, I was going to do. So I bought into it. I actually enjoyed the year in Bantam and, you know, had some success, and it was fun. I just thought it would give me another attribute or be more versatile or whatever. I don't think at the time I thought I'd stay a defenseman the rest of my life or anything, but it just worked out that, you know, I wasn't the best skater going forward. So I think in the end, it probably worked out for the best. I don't know if I would have made it as a forward. I wasn't that fleet of foot by any means, but, you know, things happen for a reason. At the time, I just wanted to play. I didn't care where or how, just get me there, get my foot in the door. So I did what I needed to do.
No, that's awesome though. I mean, I think that's great. A lot of guys would be resistant to that. I try and talk about adaptability and versatility, right? Like the more things you can do, the better, especially if you want to make it as a career, you know, like the more adaptable you can be, the better off you are. And to be able to, it probably would have helped you as a D-man too, to understand what's hard as a forward coming in on a defenseman, or, you know, like those types of things. I know when I retired, Caver, I got some goalie gear because I was one of those guys that always have the blocker and trapper like yourself after practice. And I had a connection to that position. So when I was done at 30, I was too young at that point to be like in the men's league as a player, you know, like it wasn't much of a challenger. So I bought the goalie gear and I was like, holy smokes. Like if I felt that I would have been a better goal scorer back to play again, now knowing how difficult some of these transitions and movements are, right? Like as a goalie. So can you relate to that as being a forward then switching to a D-man?
Yeah, absolutely. I already knew, you know, what forwards thought or where they would go in certain places, or, you know, where they wanted the pucks and stuff like that. So I had that intel, and to take the knowledge to be a D-man, you know, it was kind of ahead of the game because I knew what a forward was thinking when he was coming down, if he gave me inside or gave me outside or what have you, or, you know, where forwards hated to get passes along the walls or, you know, stuff like that. So definitely from a knowledge perspective, it was very beneficial moving forward to be able to relate to those guys at both sides of the ice.
How was that draft year for you? You mean, at the time, I mean, I got drafted, you were 93 and I was 94. So I was right after you. I mean, it was definitely a big deal at the time, but it's not like it is now, you know, like as far as the publicity and the social media and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Do you remember that being, I mean, stressful for you, or like how was that draft year for you? How do you remember that being?
Yeah, looking back now, I had a terrible draft year. I let it get to me 110%. I let the talk get to my head. I let it affect my play, my demeanor, how I carried myself on and off the ice. I got cocky, I got arrogant, and I got traded subsequently. And looking back, I probably would have traded me too. The way I was playing and the habits I had were not, I guess I just let stuff get to my head. You know, I played on the under 17 team, went to Japan, won a gold medal, you know, was rated in the first round. I let it all the noise get in my head. And I went out and had a terrible draft year. You know, I had 60 points, but I was terrible. I was inconsistent. I was cocky. I was fat. I was all the above. And probably the worst day of my life and the best day of my life was the draft year, when I thought I was going to go in the first round and sat there and sat there and sat there and sat there. And when I actually went at 40, I was devastated. Like, I wasn't even happy, like, you know, which is, looking back, you know, what a piece of crap I was. Like, you know, it's been my dream since I was 5 years old to play National Hockey League. And I get picked 40 and I was not even happy. Like, I was rattled, which, you know, which was the best thing for me though at the time. It was like a kick in the balls. And I used it as motivation from that point on. You know, I kind of got my head on straight, and you know, it was the best ever happened to me, probably. Just gave me a little shot in the arm and said, hey, maybe you're not as good as you think you are. Maybe you actually got to put the time in now.
Right. That's wild. I mean, I've told pieces of my story on here, and I can totally relate to that because I had a crappy draft year too. Well, you were there for my draft year, you know, and so I went from 36 goals as a 16-year-old to scoring 29 in my draft year, and I was having all kinds of problems with Brian Maxwell trying to get on the ice, and like we were butting heads there, or I don't even know if it was we were butting heads. I think he was butting heads with my dad, and then trying to navigate that draft year. And you know, I think I went from being supposed to be top 10 to going 31, and I was devastated too. Like, I can totally relate to what you're saying because it's an expectation thing, right? And you do feel like selfish and you feel entitled, like saying that now. But when you are expecting something different, you know, I mean, it is, the draft is all about expectations. If I would have thought I was going to go 50 and I went 31st, I would have been elated, right? But when it's the other way around, it's like, holy smokes, it's a kick in the pants. And yeah, I can totally see where you're coming from there because I can relate to a lot of those things. You mean, kind of being told how good you are, having success, trying to figure out how you're supposed to act in that environment, like how you're supposed to be. Because I think we get in our own heads and you stop just being a hockey player. You start becoming something else. And I'm not sure I was ever great at figuring that out, to be honest, at the end of the day, right? Like how to navigate that world. But it was an interesting scenario. I can hear you. So you went 40. How was Bryan? I mentioned Maxi. What were your thoughts and memories of playing under him for the 2.5 years or 2 years that you were there?
Well, I'll tell you what. All right, with all the stuff that's going on nowadays, with all this tough love, and you know, coaches getting obviously held accountable for some of their actions, which by all means, some of the stuff that I've been hearing is offside and stuff, but I would not have made the NHL without Bryan Maxwell scaring the crap out of me every day for 2 years. I'm telling you right now, there's no way. That guy leaned on me hard and maybe at times went overboard, but he taught me what it took to be a pro, and what, more importantly, what made me tick as a player and made me have my best games, which is half the battle for these kids coming up, you know. For certain guys, it's their speed or skill that, you know, when you look back and when you had like success or good games, you know, a lot of guys don't reflect on it when it's happening. You just kind of enjoy the moment. You know, you only reflect on it when you've had a stretch where you played like crap for 2 weeks and you're like, what's going on? But no one ever looks inside themselves when they had a 5-point night or something. You know, why did I have that 5-point night? But looking back, Maxi instilled in me at an early age what made my game go was, for me, myself, was I had to play like a prick and I had to have a burr up my butt to start a game. That's what made me tick, whether it was a hit or a fight or whatever. All my offense and everything came from that. And if I wasn't prepared to have that look in my eye or play like that, my game suffered and I didn't have success. So at a young age, thanks to him and him being up my butt, you know, and scaring the death out of me, I learned to prepare to what made me successful. And I took that with me the rest of my career. I swear to God, till my 16th year, my last game, I prepared the same way as I did in junior with the stuff like, you know, be physical, get a hit, get your, you know, all these little things. I had it written on my wall in my closet that I followed what I learned from Spokane, basically, and it carried me all the way through my career.
That's wild. Even that term you used, I'm sure Maxi didn't start it, but like when I hear "burr up your ass," like that was him. Like that's him, and that's a pregame speech, or that's him at practice. Like that's the total line that he would use, and it's amazing that you recite that now, like 20 some years later. I agree, man. Like with Maxi, there's a lot of things that, I mean, he probably wouldn't be able to coach now the same way he did, but he was a hell of a teacher. I thought he was a really great teacher, like as far as teaching different aspects of the game. He definitely wanted us to do well. He had one way of doing it, he didn't know any other way to do it. And like he needed to figure that out. But he definitely wanted the best of his players. I mean, that was his motivation. He was trying to make you good. And I find it interesting too, because you obviously resonated with him because that was the way he played too, right? Like he had to have a burr up his ass, and you now needing that burr up your ass to play well. Like he got that. And I think that might have been one of the issues with me, is not that I didn't play with necessarily an edge, but maybe not quite as much as he wanted or wished I would have, and
that's where it's hard. It's a fine line there, because certain guys don't tick like that. Like that's not what made you successful. You didn't have to play the burr up your ass. It was getting your feet moving early, or getting your hands going, or whatever. But for me, it resonated with me because that's what did make me successful in the end. Was I had to have that edge, and if I didn't have that edge, I was just a guy.
Yeah.
And everything else seemed to flow. If I didn't think about the points or goals and just played hard and heavy, that stuff just seemed to come with it.
Right.
So it was nice I learned that out. And that's where a lot of guys fall through the cracks here moving forward as they chase their dreams of being an NHL player, is the guys that maybe can't adapt to a new role or find out what makes them tick. And, like you've been at 100 camps and been up and down the minors and all that. Every guy to training camp basically is the best player on their team or the captain of their team, or, but where do you fit in? There's only 6 spots for top 6 forwards and stuff. You got to kind of adapt to that window and where the opportunity lies. And, that's where I see in doing what I do now, it's the guys that struggle to adapt or figure out what makes their game go that don't quite get there.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I mean, we were fast forwarding a little bit, but I mean, since you brought it up, I'll add to it. The one thing I think is interesting now, and maybe with what you do now as director of player development there, like that, maybe that is more communicated. Like I just remember, like back, like you said, up and down and trying to make camp, and like no one. There was one time where the LA Kings said to me, "Okay, you would be our 3rd or 4th line right wing, so we want you to put on some weight, and like that's the role you're going to fill." And that was like such music to my ears, because it's like, okay, well now I know what I need to do, right? How I need to play, and not, not worry about trying to score goals when I'm getting 7 minutes a night. There was always like a confusion there. Like if you want me to be a penalty killer, tell me and I'll be a penalty killer, right? But like you come up into these environments, you don't really know what's expected or what is wanted, and it's not a resistance to do it. At least for me, it wasn't. It was just I didn't know what I was supposed to do. But do you guys do that more now? Like saying, hey, if you're going to make this team, you got to do this and be really good at whatever, face-offs and penalty kill to get your foot in the door.
I think the communication's gotten a lot better from our days. It was just like show up and play, and there wasn't that open door policy, I guess, per se, or the feedback that you need. Now there's so much video and one-on-one meetings and all that stuff that I think it's laid out more clearly for a lot of guys now than maybe when we came up. It was just like, go play hard and do what you do,
right,
and hope for the best. Now it's like, if you do this, this, and this, you'll have a chance. This is where we're looking. This is where the gap is. This is where you'll fit into this lineup. Here's what you got to do. Work on this, this, and this, and you'll have success.
Yeah. Which I think is amazing, because then like the onus is really on the player. And, on a personal level, I mean, I'm totally accountable to wherever my career ended up and how it worked out. But it would have been like, I would have loved to have used my speed and my size and like filled that spot on a 3rd or 4th line role for however long it would have taken, right? To try and fill what I really wanted to do, which was maybe score goals at that league. Right. But it was never presented that way. So it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a resistance. It was just an inability to like really live into that role. Right. And now it seems like guys, well, the roles are less prevalent. It seems actually like the depth from like 1st to 4th line, like everyone's kind of doing the same thing. You just don't have guys that run out and fight and, check for 30 seconds and get off the ice, So I think the game has changed that way a little bit, where there's more versatility throughout that lineup, or interchangeability, I guess is maybe a better word. Right. In our day, I mean, you couldn't have a 4th line right wing go and be a top 6 guy. None of those guys were capable of doing that, right? Now it's a little different. But let's go back to your scenarios. I mean, amazing junior career, twice an All-Star, twice a World Junior gold medal champion. We should touch on that a little bit. Like, is that still one of your fondest memories of your hockey career, being a part of those teams?
Absolutely. I know you got a chance to do it too, and there's nothing like representing your country, especially at a young age in such a prestigious tournament. I got to do it in Canada too, which was, close to my hometown. We played games in Calgary, Edmonton, or Red Deer, so it was home games for me. All my family and friends there, playing in front of your country, and it was the year of the lockout too, so people were starved for hockey. Those are some of my best hockey memories. That team we had in '95, like in Red Deer and stuff. Oh my God, it was, I think 90% of the guys played in the NHL. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And the fact that we ran the table, and some of those friendships I still have to this day. With guys on that team, it was special. It was really special to do it at home. It was special to do it a second year. Like the first year I made the team as a 7th, played sparingly. Still a fabulous experience to win a gold medal overseas, represent your country, but to get to do it again and be a bigger part of it, wear a letter, just run the table at home and win a gold medal in your hometown. And it was spectacular. I still love those. We had a reunion there 2 years ago at the World Juniors. They did a reunion thing when it was in Vancouver.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Like just to see the guys again and tell the stories, and it was a blast, man. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that team was special. I actually interviewed Wade Redden a little while ago, and he was on that team with you. And there was something special about that year with the lockout. All the NHL players that were available were there in Canada, sold out barns, like just electric atmosphere. And to be able to bring it home was super cool. And it's funny, anytime I talk to guys that have done that, meaning like win a gold medal, and not even like of the level maybe of that year, right? Like, which was a really special year. It still is like this pinnacle moment, unless you've like won an Olympic gold or won a Stanley Cup or something, right? Because it's hard to win, and you do that on that level for your country. It's a pretty big deal. I know you won gold there again in the World Championships. Is that as special in your mind, or is there a different feeling to that?
It still is. It was a gold medal for your country, but I didn't grow up wanting to win a world championship gold medal like a lot of European players did before they played in the NHL. My goal is to win a Stanley Cup. The World Junior thing was unbelievable because it's the best of the best, but that tournament falls when the Stanley Cup playoffs are on. So it's a different feeling. It's almost like it's an accomplishment, but it's still a failure because you want to be playing for the Stanley Cup. It's like, not all the best players in the world. It's the guys that didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah.
The best of that bunch. So what does that, make me?
Yeah.
But it was still special. It's still a gold medal. It's still for your country. It still meant a lot. I still have it. I got the chance to play on that team with, Rob Blake and future Hall of Famers and stuff like that. There's still bonds and friendships you make there when you win. It doesn't matter what league it is or what it's for, but it definitely had a different feeling than the World Juniors or an Olympics or a Stanley Cup or something like that.
Yeah. I guess that I can relate to that. I mean, the best, because the World Junior is, the best of what's available for sure. That's the best of the best at that level, right? And you said it's a kind of a tier down, although it's a hell of a great. The talent level in that World Championships is great, and that must have been really eye opening too, to see how much talent is outside of the NHL, even, right?
Oh yeah,
that's there.
Yeah, the guys that this before they all like rushed over here, and all the best players were playing national. Like, there were still really good players in Europe that hadn't crossed over yet. You wouldn't know who they were, and you get out there and you'd be like, where the hell is this guy playing? Like, how was he not over in North America? Like, you don't even know. A guy blows by and you're like, who the hell was that? Who's this guy? You look up his stats and you're like, holy crap. He's a pretty good player. But yeah, it was an eye opener for sure. There's a lot of talent out there.
Do you I had Scott Nickel on the other day, and he was talking, and he's like, everyone, we sort of talked about it for a little bit, just saying, like, my envision when I was a young guy growing up, it was like the best 700 players in the world played in the NHL. And he's like, once I figured out that was not the truth, he was like, I realized like I had a chance. He was like, there's better players than me, but you have to be a part of the puzzle and you need to fit in. Like, I think that's the truth. Do you feel that way as well?
Absolutely. Like, there's a million better players than me that I played with growing up that didn't make it. You have to A, be lucky, you B, got to work hard, and C, you got to find where you fit in the puzzle. Like I hit on before, like, you got to find where you fit in. Depending on the organization, it could be something different. Different teams have different needs, and timing's a part of it too. Like sometimes you miss your window, or sometimes you get lucky. Like I got really lucky to turn pro in '95, and the Islanders were going young. I didn't have to slug it out in the minors for 3 years. I made the team out of camp, and I stayed, and I got to learn from my mistakes and play. A lot of guys don't get that opportunity. They got to slug it out in the minors. So there is some timing involved to it too. You got to be lucky. But Scotty Nickel is a prime example of exactly like finding your niche and carving out an identity for yourself and making a career out of it. He bombed around the minors. He was small. He was tough as hell. But he found out where he fit in and did whatever he could to stay there. And he had a really good NHL career, and he's done great for himself.
From 27 years old, right? I played with him in Detroit. I just love his story. Like, unbelievable story to be in the minors that long at that size doing those types of things. And all of a sudden he played 10 years in the show after that. Like, it was such a great story. I love what you talk about there. Like, and I think that is something that we haven't really talked about on the podcast before, is that you mentioned the opportunity and being really transparent about your opportunity there in New York, because you can be 20 years old on a team like maybe say the Red Wings at the time. And like, where are you going to be at 20 on that team? Right. Or if you're 20 years old on a team like the Islanders, and where you're expected to maybe not make the playoffs, expected that this kid's going to make some mistakes and we're going to throw him back out there again. That would be an easier environment to dip your toe in the NHL when you're not necessarily worried about that next shift never coming again. If something goes wrong on it, was it communicated to you kind of that way, or do you just sort of realize that, hey, this is where this team's at, and these coaches are going to put me back out on the ice?
Yeah, there was some communication with that. You're going to live and we're going to hold you accountable, but you're going to get an opportunity to learn from your mistakes and go from there. And there is positives and negatives to that, because you get a little more rope and you're not maybe walking on eggshells. And sometimes that's a good thing to have to earn it more. I didn't feel that pressure of someone knocking on my door, per se, and probably got complacent a little bit at times because of it. Whereas if someone's knocking on your door and if you have a bad game, someone like the NFL where they can cut you next weekend, you're always on your toes. And there were spurts probably there in my first couple of years where I didn't have that inside pressure or outside, someone knocking on the door, and I probably let it get to me again, and let it go to my head a little bit and took my foot off the gas. And, it's no coincidence I got traded another 3 times or 4 times in my first 5 years pro, probably because of that, because I got too much rope and I took it for granted. And, it's not an easy road, man. It's not, I made it and I stuck around a long time, but there's a lot of bumps in the road, and it could have went another way. I'll tell you that for sure.
Who was on that rookie team? Well, actually, I could bring it up. I mean, was that when you guys had like the Charas and the Berard and like
was a couple of years. My first year, it was me. The young guys were like me, Todd Bertuzzi, Eric Lindros, and then the next year,
not Eric,
Berard,
his brother.
Yeah, Brett came in. Yeah, we lived together.
Yeah,
and Todd Bertuzzi was there that year, and then we had a ton of older guys. Like we had an older team. There were some young guys, but as the years went on, like my third year, Z was in the system, Zdeno. B was there my second year. So
Brian,
Eric Fico. Yeah. So we had a good group of young guys, but we had a great group of older guys, Richie Pilon, Mick Vukota, Pat Flatley. I had Matt Schneider. I had Doug Huda, Brett Severin, all these guys Mike Huff, guys that took me under their wing, Doug Huda was great with me. He coaches now, and he was one of my first roommates, and he was a great pro to be around. I was a young kid, and we had our fun, but he held me accountable and showed me the ropes of what it took to be a pro. And I had a lot of guys that had a helping hand and me sticking around and all that stuff. I had really met some good people along the way.
Was Doug Huda a letter at that point? Like, was he, do you remember who the captains were on that team?
Pat Flatley, my first year, was the captain. And we had Pilon, we had Derek King, who was great. He coaches now in the minors too. Yeah. Kinger was a great great assistant captain. You know, we had some older guys that have been around. Tommy Fitzgerald, I played with for a little bit.
That's funny. I played with a lot of those guys you're mentioning, like Huffer and Fitzgerald
Thomas,
and King.
you know, we had some. Wendell Clark was there my first year.
Yeah.
You know, we had some names. You know, there were some really heavy leadership guys to lean on and stuff. So, you know, I got a good dose of leadership qualities from guys just sitting in that room and listening to guys and watched how they prepare and stuff.
Do you remember some guys like have that influential kind of person when they first come in and kind of, like you said, teach them how to be a pro, but also maybe teach how to act when you get a little older in the league and how to treat some of these young guys? Did you take that with you, like how Hoods kind of took care of you there, and did you try and do that yourself later on?
Absolutely. Like I took like from Hoods and all these guys, Brent Severn and Chief and Mick and Stevie. I remember, like, I say this at my development camp every year, and you know how this is. We run a development camp. You finally get to bring all your prospects in, and you know I'm not, at least in my opinion, development camps. It's in June or July. I'm not there to bag guys. You know, you're not supposed to be peaking in June or July. It's more about teaching them what it takes to be a pro and how to get there and how to stay there, and you know, all the little things. Never mind on the ice, the stuff that goes into maturing and preparing, and you know, giving yourself the best opportunity. And you know, I think you probably felt the same way when you go to first camp. You know, all you want to do is fit in. You know, you're an 18-year-old kid, and you know, you're sitting in your stall and you don't know a soul, and you're looking around the room and you got, you know, Wendell Clark and all these guys there, and you just want someone to talk to you or take you out to lunch or something. I remember Steve Thomas took me for lunch my first camp and just made me feel like, okay, you know, he took me out, had a beer, had lunch, and you know, I wasn't like a shunned rookie, you know, and I remember that stuck with me. And I made a point of that, like literally every camp that I was at when I had made it, I would always take a group of the young guys and either take them for lunch or take them to dinner. Or, you know, the worst thing is when you're a kid and you go to training camp and you're on the road for 2 weeks and you get a roommate that just chucks his bag in the room and you're left there sitting there on the edge of your bed. Like, what do I do? You know?
Yeah.
So I always made a point, whoever I got hooked up with at camp or whatever, wherever I went, they went. I always took them to dinner, lunch, anything. Like, you got to show them, you know, and make them feel like part of the group. I was never into that hazing crap and, you know, pack my bag rookie. I was always the outgoing guy that, you know, I was in those shoes. And you just want to feel like part of it. You want to feel like, you know, you're part of it and guys like you and, you know, bring you under their wing. So I always try to take that with me, and I still try to express that to these guys now. If you see a guy sitting by himself, don't, you know, take him to lunch with you. Don't leave a guy sitting in their room by themselves, you know. So last thing you want to be is the guy sitting in your room, like, what's everyone doing? No one calls you or whatever. So that's something I still try to instill to this day that I learned from those older guys back at camps.
Good for you, man. It makes such a big difference. I mean, that was – and Ty Domi did nothing mean to me. He wasn't rude, but he was my roommate on the road when I got traded to Toronto. And yeah, I mean, he was nice, but it wasn't like, it definitely wasn't, hey, Pods, you want to come or go? Or, you know, it was like he'd come in, you know, he'd check his phone and kind of he'd be off, and he was cordial, but it definitely didn't feel like a part of anything necessarily, right? And like you said, it's hard enough to navigate that environment, you know, just as an athlete, right? How to perform on the ice, let alone trying to navigate the social consequences of what's going on outside of the rink, right? And fitting into a team and with your peers and being young in the room. And I mean, there's all these things that are kind of hurdles that you got to get over as a young guy. That some guys forget about when they get older because they've been there, and you know, and some guys get comfortable or they don't care, or maybe they're just not wired that way either, right? I really no judgment there, but I can see how that would make a big difference if there is somebody in your room that's being accommodating and wants to go out with you. I have to ask about Zdeno because I do not know him at all, but I've really enjoyed watching his career and watching his progression and watching how he stays relevant and kind of the leader that he's turned into. From what I remember of him as a young guy, like, I didn't think he was very good. Like he was awkward, and like there was a lot of, like, to be what he is now. Like, what is your memory of him there as a rookie coming in there? Like, would you have ever expected what you see now?
You know what? He was a specimen, like, off the ice. I've never seen anyone work harder at their craft and want it more. Was he pretty to watch when he was younger? No, by no means. He was awkward. He was like Bambi, but he worked at it. And the career that this guy's carved out for himself just shows you sheer hard work and perseverance and preparation and wanting it and believing in yourself. Norris Trophy, Stanley Cup, still playing at 40, whatever the hell he is, 44. He's a leader. He, just shows the guy the way. Like when he came up, he was just a big young kid that could barely skate, but was strong as a bull and worked extremely hard at his game. And he stuck with it and obviously became, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's, I still see Z from time to time in the rinks or whatever, and he is still the gentleman he was when he was a 20-year-old kid. Just the epitome of a professional.
Yeah. No, I love his story, and to hear that. Do you think that did he kind of get his carve, because he was still a pretty high pick, I think, like into the NHL, like maybe a second round or something. Don't quote me on that, but again, watching his skill set, like I didn't see where that was coming from. But was he like? Do you think he was touted or drafted as like a guy that was going to fight? Like that was sort of his scenario and be like a 5'6" guy? Was that his projection? Do you think?
Yeah, I never saw him in junior, but seeing him at the first couple camps, I would say he was probably projected as a third pairing D who was tough as nails and would hold everyone accountable on the ice. And
right.
I don't think anyone projected him to be one of the best shutdown D in the league, defenseman,
yeah.
But he worked at it. He got better. He fine-tuned his game. He found his comfort zone. He realized he didn't have to be Bobby Orr, but, he still to this day, he's very effective at what he does. His ice time's been dialed back a little bit. He is 44 years old, but, he's still hard to play against, tough as nails. No one wants to go in the corners with him. He makes the simple, easy plays. Yeah. He gets up ice, he blocks shots, and he's just a leader. And he's a winner, obviously, Yeah.
No, I love what they got going there, Boston. That's a hard team not to like. Yeah, I mean, I know the Toronto fans, and there's some people that listen to this, but I mean, that's just a good team. Like it's a good team. Like they got that going on there, and I've heard them talk about that too, where we talked about the young guys already, like that some of these older guys, like the Bergerons and Charas and Marchands or whoever they may be, will get assigned like some of these younger guys that come in almost as like an assignment. Like this is your guy, right? Like you make sure that he's comfortable and make him a part of things. And I mean, that just tells you, I mean, the bottom guy's got to feel as important as the top guy or like he belongs, right? And I mean, they've developed a way to do that there.
Yeah.
So that first trade, let's get into it. So you mean you're 3 years in? Have you guys made the playoffs at that point with the Islanders?
Not even close.
Not even close. Okay.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself, which you've experienced the playoffs later in your career and with different teams, but like I noticed that even from being involved in Detroit Red Wings camp and not being and being around the Florida Panthers. I went to the Stanley Cup final. I was a black ace on that team, but like it's like two different leagues that you're in almost, like the teams that are competing and the teams that aren't. Like it's such a different feeling and such a different culture. And so you were in the NHL, an NHL player, played 3 seasons, hadn't experienced what the NHL playoffs was like, hadn't really experienced what it's like to be on a winner. And then now you get the call and you're going to Vancouver. What was that like, and going to a team that was a bit more competitive at that time?
That trade was devastating. Like I had no idea it was coming. So I'm just starting my 3rd year. Mike Milbury calls me in and names me captain. I'm 22 years old. I'm like, oh, awesome. I was jacked up, like 22 years old. I'm captain of the team. We got a good young team coming up. We start the season terribly. I put a ton of immense pressure on myself trying to be that guy at that age. Probably wasn't ready for it and internalized it all, and my game suffered. I was not very good. Just from me putting so much pressure on myself, thinking I was the captain, I had to be something more than I was.
Yeah. And
my game suffered terribly. I had a horrible season. That being said, though, I don't think it warranted a trade at that point, but the bottom line is winning. I thought when I got named captain, I was going to be a lifer there.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I literally had just flown like 4 of my best friends down from Calgary for like Thursday to Monday. You know, we had a game on Thursday and Saturday. Come hang out in New York. Let's hang out. We play Thursday night. Take the boys for some beers. Phone rings the next day after practice. My buddy answers it, and he's like, "It's Mike Milbury." My first thought was, "Oh crap, someone saw us out last night. I'm in trouble again." You know, like, well, I busted again. You know,
Yeah.
boys are out. Pick up the phone. He's like, "We trade you to Vancouver. You're on an 8:00 flight tonight. Basically, thanks for your time." I was like, pure shock, like through the phone, through the wall, like didn't even know where to start. Just a puddle of tears, like a mess. Hopped on a plane, flew all the way to Vancouver, played Saturday night, and then got on a plane and flew all the way home because it was like Olympic break in '98. So I had a week to get my stuff together. I came back to New York, but the rest of that season, I was a write-off, man. I was a mess. I was, you know, doubting myself, whatever, all the above. Buried myself into Vancouver's nightlife, and I was a mess, man. I was a mess.
Let's dig into that a little bit, though, because there's so many layers to that, Caber. So you're a 22-year-old captain in the NHL, and rightfully so. I mean, you know, because you were deemed captain worthy. Obviously, you're going to take this serious, or else you wouldn't have got it in the first place, right? So you're trying to be somebody that you said maybe you had to. You're trying to reinvent yourself unnecessarily, right? And of course, all the signs are pointing to like being a long-time Islander at that point. You've already played 3 years, and you're the captain at 22. You know, like I can imagine what was going on in your head. And then Mike Milbury calls, which I'm sure you have some amazing Mike Milbury stories from the ones I've heard. But like, do you like? Was it like that was the same phone call I got getting traded from Florida at 20 years old? But I mean, I was a guy that was in the minors, and I was like, wow, that was a 1.5-minute call, and they just told me that I got traded. You know, like. I would expect they would have given a little more respect to the captain, but it was just, see ya, thanks for your service, you're out.
Literally, that was the gist of it. You're on an 8:00 flight tonight. Literally, like, thanks for your time. And me and Mike had a good relationship. Like, you know, he's a hard ass and he's done really well for himself. But, you know, me and him, we had a good relationship. Hence, I was the captain. We had a good relationship. I don't know if he saw a little bit of himself the way he played, like in me or whatever, but we had a good relationship. He became GM there the first year that I had made the team when we drafted Wade Wren, then we traded for Berard and all that stuff. So he was hard on me, but we had a really good relationship. And, you know, I just felt blindsided, you know, because at no point did the thought ever cross my mind that I was going to get traded. I know that we weren't doing very well and stuff like that, but the thought had never crossed my mind. And to have it thrown at me and then have to go suit up in a different place, and it was just it was devastating. Like, you know, you talk about mental health and stuff, like that wasn't even discussed back then, but I was a mess. Like, looking back now, like those next 3 months in Van, I was a disaster. Right. Like, it's amazing to me that I still figured it back out and hung around longer, because it could have went the other way. Very easy. Right. I could have been out of the league in a hurry.
How did that go for you? So, I mean, you sent, because Linden came back in that trade, and you know, Bertuzzi. So, I mean, that was a big trade. You were the captain. Linden was the captain at that time too, right? So these two teams traded captains.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, but that's when Mess came in there, and they kind of.
They were kind of moving them.
They kind of were pushing Trevor out. Mess was captain, and, you know, so it was a and to have to come in. You know, obviously we could trade it, but Trevor Linden's an icon in Vancouver, rightfully so. And then we could trade it for him. So all of a sudden, people may dislike you just to start with because you got traded for, you know, an icon and, you know, one of the Vancouver legends. So it wasn't easy to step into that,
right.
Obviously. And then, you know, we had Keane in there. We had a spectacular team, but they had made like 100 trades. Like, it was, I think when I got there, we had 10 new guys, like in a hotel, like literally. Mike had just pulled the trigger and traded like everyone. And on paper, our team was like ridiculous. But we were like 15 points out of the playoffs. It's amazing to me how bad that team was with the amount of talent we had on it. It was crazy.
Right. How was you mentioned being a mess or a puddle, and we don't have to get into specifics of what that means. You know, you said you're going out a little bit and you're having a hard time dealing with it. Was there anyone around you then, like as far as like the team, was like a coach talking to you, or like was anyone helping you through that, or did you just feel that you were kind of on your own with it?
I internalized it, I'm sure. But, you know, the coaches were great. We had great assistant coaches with Mike. It was Stan Schmiel, who's with the Canucks. He was awesome. And Glenn Hanlon, who used to play there too. They were great assistant coaches and good guys. But the organization was kind of a mess at that point. Like, they made a ton of trades. You know, Mike was Mike. I liked Mike. You know, he's a strong, brash personality, but we got along really well. If you played hard for him and, you know, and stood up for yourself, he liked you. So, you know, we got along fine. I think we had a FU fight one of the first couple of weeks I was there, and then he liked me after that. So I played a lot and stuff like that. But we had a young team too. So we were all kind of going through it together. And, you know, Mess was great, but he was winding down, you know. So, and we didn't have a good team. So it was like we were out of the playoffs, and there was really no direction, you know, like there was really nothing to play for. It was a tough situation to be in.
I've heard two different stories with Mark, and I don't know what you want to get into or not, but like I've talked to guys that think that he was like what is kind of portrayed in the media as this like one of the best captains to ever grace professional sports. And I've talked to other guys that have said honestly almost the exact opposite. And to me, that just blows my mind, like how there can be that type of contrary opinion about somebody like that. Do you have a stake in the ground with either side there that you'd want to talk about?
Well, you know, I can't comment on the Mess that won 6 cups previous to me playing with him. Obviously, he's one of the best players ever, a legend in the game, played on some great teams, but also went to New York and built a team around himself and won a cup for an organization that hadn't won a cup in whatever amount of years. But like I said, his career was winding down. I don't think I got a glimpse of the Mark Messier that you saw in the 90s or the early 90s. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's unfair to, you know, put a label on, because he played for so long that I only saw a blink of it the year and a half I was there. It was an honor to play with him. How many guys can say they play with the guy that won 6 cups?
Sure.
You know, come on, seriously. So he was definitely a leader. He did hold guys accountable and stuff, but I think our team was so dysfunctional in what was going on with all the trades, and there was no unity, that there were so many new faces that it was hard to be a leader in that group too. I got there and it was a mess. It was a mess.
It was a mess. Which, I mean, kind of a short tenure there. Like you said, that first trade happened, you were still 22 years old, which is, third year. That's, people forget. Try and look back when you're 50, like people listening, and what you were doing when you were 22, right? Like to be a captain of an NHL team and get traded and have your life uprooted like that and have to deal with a new city and new players. And like, there's a lot to manage there to try and figure out. And then now you're going across the country again to Chicago. Like, were you more, I don't think you're ever ready for a trade, but was there talk of it this time, at least, that maybe you were on the block?
Yeah, that one was a lot easier. So that summer after I got traded there, they cleaned house and they brought in Brian Burke to be GM and they brought in Mark Crawford to be coach. I had a contract dispute, so I missed the first 13 games or whatever. But played that year, had a pretty good year, reined myself back in. We had a good young team, really good young team, like moving forward. Eddie Jovanowski, Matthias Olin, Marcus Naslin, Todd Bertuzzi, all these guys coming up. So a good young team. But that summer in my exit meeting with Berkey, he called me in and he was totally upfront and honest with me and said, if you make it through this summer, you're going to be here a long time. So he kind of had laid the groundwork that maybe something's in the works here. And obviously that turned out to be the summer that he made the big trade for the Sedin twins.
Yeah.
So he called me a week before the draft and said, hey, we got something in the works. The odds are pretty good you're going to get traded. And then he called me the night before the draft and said, you're getting traded. So there was a great line of communication. I have the utmost respect for Berkey and how he handled it. As a player, you just want to be told the truth, whether it's good or bad. You don't want to be left in the dark and blindsided, kind of like my first trade.
Yeah.
And Berkey was awesome about that. He kept me in a loop the whole way. I knew it was happening. It's still not easy to get traded, but it's a lot easier when you know it's coming. And, the rest is history. I think the trade worked out pretty damn well for them, obviously, getting the City brothers and the careers that they had.
Well, and not to mention, it's easier when you're not in the middle of a season, right? Like,
Yeah.
like that's a massive difference too. So how lay that one out for me. So you were a part of them being able to draft the Sedins back to back?
So I got traded for, I guess it's the third overall pick or whatever. So I went to Chicago for their draft pick, and they ended up taking the Sedins 2 and 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a pretty big trade to be a part of. Obviously, those guys are going to be in the Hall of Fame one day and had prestigious careers. To go the other way in that trade, looking back, it's an honor.
So it was you for that trade, and so then, and I guess Chicago would have gotten their first round pick then, or their
yeah,
usual
exactly.
one?
I believe, I don't know who that turned out to be. I guess they flopped picks or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, so I went the other way and spent a whole 1 year in Chicago. And
how was that experience? Did you like? I mean, people seem to love playing there. Did you enjoy playing there?
My favorite city in the world, bar none. I only played there one season, but I spent 6 off seasons there in the summer, even when I was playing for the Leafs. Previous to having children, Chicago was our home in the summer. Love the people, love the vibe, just outgoing, great atmosphere, kind of like the cleaner, nicer, friendlier version of New York with the same amenities. We loved our time there. Hockey-wise, it sucked. I missed the window of where they were, selling out buildings and all that stuff. We weren't very good, but, to play for another Original Six team was, a dream come true for sure.
That's wild. So, yeah, I mean, looking at the hockey DB, so now, like, that's you're 6 seasons in, you haven't played in a playoff game yet.
Nope. Going for that record.
Did that, obviously, you're a competitive guy. I played with you, and you were super successful in junior, and all that stuff. Was that starting to kind of weigh on you? Like, and I'm not sure how it can because it's not an individual, personal thing. But were you just dying to get in there?
Yeah, you just want to win and have a chance. The playoffs are, the cream of the crop rise, and you want to elevate. You want to have a chance to battle. Every kid grows up wanting to battle for the Stanley Cup, and to not even get a chance to do it my first 6 years is embarrassing. It ate at me for sure. There's only so many times you can go to the World Championships and stuff. Summers are long enough as it is.
Yeah.
And and then self-doubt comes in still. You still don't, I've been on New York, Vancouver, Chicago. I'm on 3 teams in 5 years or whatever, 4 years. And you start to question your own game, your own skill set. And, what am I doing wrong? Why do I keep getting traded? Why do these people not like me? What can I fix? What do I need to do to stick in one place for a while? How do I win? All this stuff. It eats at you for sure. Yep.
At that point, had you said previous to kids, were you with your wife at this time, or were you taking these trades and moving around solo?
So we dated, and my wife moved in with me in December of '99 when she got her master's degree from ASU. So she was party to the Chicago trade.
Gotcha.
We were in Vancouver. That was her first actual trade being a part of. She was ecstatic because moving to Vancouver, coming from New York, never been in Canada, was a real tough transition for her. And you know how the hockey world can be, stepping into a wives' room and what may have you, and not being able to work because she was American, and she's a go-getter. She's getting her doctorate degree right now. She's still working, and to come to Canada and give up what she had just done, being a teacher, having a master's degree, not being able to do anything with it was hard on her, to say the least. I'm going on road trips and she's trapped in a 1-bedroom in Vancouver with no friends and nothing to do. It's not easy on the girls for sure. So we started 99. We started living together.
Right. Because I've thought about that. My whole career, I didn't have a serious girlfriend and definitely no kids, right? And I couldn't imagine doing that with family in tow and kids in school and minor hockey and all the stuff that comes with being a dad. It even adds more complexity to it. We end up in Toronto, and what amazing years there. And that whole scenario, I'd love to Toronto. So you get traded again, and now you go to Toronto. And What were you excited to go there? You think that was going to be a good place?
Yeah. So this is a good trade story for you, this one. So now it's getting like old hat for me to get traded. It's not bothering me anymore. So I go through training camp. Let me just rewind here. So that summer, this is a funny story. That summer, the year I held out in Vancouver, I signed a 2+1 deal. So the third year was a club option. So I got traded to Chicago. I play that season in my second year under that contract. That summer, it's a club option. They chose not to pick up my option and take me to arbitration, which I had never done before. So we go to arbitration, and you have to go sit in this meeting. And I don't know if you ever went through that, but it's a painful experience. So our lawyer,
Tell you how bad you are, essentially, right?
Agent goes first, and by the end of the hour, you feel like, how have I not won a Norris Trophy, or why is my jersey not retired? And then the next hour, you're literally in tears, and you're like, how am I not in the East Coast League? Like, they just eat you down, like how bad you are. So we ended up winning the arbitration case. So I don't like to talk money or numbers, but basically my option was for $1.85 million, and they turned it down, and we won the arbitration case, and I got $2.15 million. So that was like a kick in the nuts for the Blackhawk organization, the fact that now they're paying me more.
Right.
So there had been whispers, back in that day, if you win an arbitration case, a lot of guys get moved because they don't like dealing with, whatever. So I go to camp, I go through training camp, and there have been whispers that, I'm getting traded because of the arbitration thing or whatever. So I go through all the exhibition games. And after our last exhibition game, a couple Russian players on the team, Alexei Zamnov and Boris Mironov, were having beers after the game, whatever, in a hotel room. And they're like, you're getting traded tomorrow. Like, we know Alexander Karpovtsev just called us, said he's getting traded to the Blackhawks. So they told me first that I was getting traded. This was the night before. So I was kind of prepared. I knew. So the next day the phone rings, and it's our new GM at the time was Mike Smith. They just fired Murph from Anaheim. And Mike Smith had taken over, who I do not have a relationship whatsoever, barely know the guy. He phones me up the next day. We're back in Chicago. I answer the phone, and it's Mike Smith, who I barely know. And he says, we've traded you. And I said, okay, where am I going? And he says, we traded you to Quebec. I'm like, excuse me? Quebec doesn't even have a team. Okay. Like, he was trying to be funny. Like, we have like this pre-existing relationship or something. Like, I thought it was the biggest dick move ever. Like, I don't know the guy. You're playing with, this is my life here.
Right.
And okay, where am I getting traded? Toronto. I just hung the phone up. That was it. So off to Toronto I go, early October. Was ecstatic to go to Toronto because I knew they'd been in the conference finals, playoff team. First time I'm actually going to a team that's not like rebuilding or, trying to get to the playoffs. This is an established team with the likes of Matt Sundin and so on. And I was ecstatic. Obviously, Toronto, everyone grows up in Canada watching the Maple Leafs on TV. So I couldn't have been happier and more excited to get to Toronto.
That's awesome. And Mike Smith, like he was the GM in Toronto too at one point, correct?
Yeah.
Was that before then or after? I'm getting my timeline wrong.
Before, I think.
Okay.
I think it's before, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was before too, because Fletcher traded for me, and then Fletcher got fired that summer, which was really great for my career, and he came in, and yeah, he was a really different guy. And
he was like a werewolf, and he was into like art and stuff.
I think we have the same memory of him because he didn't seem to want to get me into that lineup very quickly. So I didn't like him very much. He ended up trading me as well. But hey there, just want to take a quick break from the conversation to remind you that if you're enjoying these conversations and with these amazing guests that I've been bringing on, that There's a lot that goes into it, and the best way you can support this conversation and this podcast is to share it. Personal marketing is always the best. So for you to share it on your social media, for you to talk to people about the episode and to say, hey, you should check this out, that really makes a big difference. It really helps to grow it. It really helps to get it in front of more people, because I do think these are conversations that matter. I think some of these conversations are going, beyond the lines of the game and really grounding the game in a really human aspect and a really human element. So I enjoy these conversations. I know you do too. I really appreciate the personal feedback that I get, but if you can expand that feedback into your own social network, that's really how this thing is going to grow. So thank you so much for listening. Thanks for being here, and let's get you back to the episode. So you're in Toronto. So you're in the center of the hockey universe, according to many Canadians. A lot of eyes are on you. What did that feel like playing there? Because I have my own experience with that, of course, and you came in a little different ways. You were established NHLer at that point. But what was that like, stepping into that locker room and into that city?
It was cool as hell, man. Like, it's the hockey. I didn't realize it was the hockey mecca of the world, or how it was, until we actually went to the playoffs and you went around in the playoffs, and to see how the city reacts to just winning one round was unbelievable to be a part of. I think every kid should experience playing in a hockey market like that, whether it's Montreal or Toronto. It's definitely not an easy place to play. A lot of guys can't take that pressure because there's outside pressure 24/7 there. You cannot get away from hockey. It's a big fishbowl. Wherever you go, whatever you do, all eyes are on you. Everyone knows who you are, but it's a special place. And I absolutely love my time there.
So the transition of like getting in, and there wasn't, you felt comfortable enough in your own game. Like you said, you just gone through the arbitration though, like you'd been kind of ripped apart. Now you're stepping into this new scenario. Were you okay like with that from a mental kind of game of like just getting in there and doing your job?
Yeah. You know what? I went in really positive and just wanted to find a home. I bounced around so much, 5 teams and whatever, 4 or 5 teams in whatever, 5 years. Like it was a lot. And like I said, I just wanted to find a place that I fit in and could spend some time. And, I was really lucky to have, sick leadership guys. Like Matt Sundin was unbelievable. Like I've never played with a leader like him, to be able to follow what he did and just watch that guy, how he conducted himself on and off the ice. And you talked about before, like, make guys feel like they're part third and fourth line guys. That's a guy to me that when I played with, he made everyone in the group feel like they were the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I learned a ton from that guy, just being around him every day. And our teams just, got better and deeper. And I had a good, solid first year there. And then my second year, I really kind of took off. I got an opportunity to play on a power play, and me and Caberlet partnered up, and my game just kind of took off from there. And, it really started to evolve.
Yeah, Thomas was a great guy. I played with him in the Rock there. Real nice guy, great demeanor, real talented kid. Was Markov there with you for a while too, Danny?
Yeah, Danny Markov.
What a beauty he is. Yeah, he was there with me. So I have experience with him. But let's talk about 2 things I want to touch on. One, your first playoff series. So now you do get to the playoffs. Like you said, you win the first round, and you got, so you didn't get through the second round. What was that like? Your first, like, did you have the butterflies? Like, was it like you were a kid stepping on the ice for the first time again? Like, what did that feel like in those NHL playoffs?
Oh my God, it was seriously butterflies. Yeah, I think I was sick to my stomach the first game. Hadn't had that feeling in a long time. And, the atmosphere in the Battle of Ontario, like we faced Ottawa that year, like we did every year I was there. But just the city and the feeling, and, like I said, winning that series, and, we lost to Jersey in the next round, but just getting that experience and, to build on. Was a great start. Finally, it had taken so long that it was awesome. It was great, just scoring their first playoff goal and stuff. It was I still remember like it was yesterday.
That's so cool. And yeah, you touched on Matt's and Matt's. I was 20 at the time when I got traded there, and you kind of forget how young he actually was too. Like the hockey world is crazy how it does that. 5 years seems like 20. but he was there and he was the captain, and I just couldn't believe. I mean, how big, plus he's 6'4" and he's blonde, right? And he's walking around that city as the captain of the Leafs. Like, I couldn't imagine being Matt Sundin in that city, and how gracious he was, and how professional he was in doing it. You know, he just had that calm presence about him. He was very professional, was able to still go out in a way that was, you know, appropriate, right? And keep the guys around him and stuff. Yeah, he was. I can see why everyone has such great things to say about him in Toronto, because he really did. He was he was just a great captain for that team.
Yeah, no, like I said, I learned so much from him, and like moving forward as the years went on, the teams that we put together, and you know, it's no coincidence that, like I said, my career started to finally find its place there in Toronto, but it's because of guys like Matt Sundin and Gary Roberts and Joe Nieuwendyk and those leaders that just did everything the right way on and off the ice, and you know, brought guys along for it, just to be a part of that and be a sponge around it. You know, it's like, when I look back now, and you know, I talk about this stuff at my dev camps, like I said before, but I thought I was working hard off the ice and doing the right things to be a successful pro, but I wasn't even close until I got to see the likes of Matt Sundin and Gary Roberts and what they did off the ice and how they conducted themselves and what went into being a pro and why they had so much success. I wasn't even close. So I literally, like, seeing Gary Roberts and how he worked out and the stuff he put in his body and stuff, I literally latched onto that guy for a whole summer, one summer, and just sponged him. And, you know, that's when I had my most success. That's when I scored 17, 19 goals, whatever. Got, you know, all this stuff started happening because of A, learning from them, but B, putting the time in and actually doing the work and becoming a pro. And, you know, it's not easy, and you think you're doing it, and sometimes you have to be around pros to be a pro. Yeah. And I always tell the kids, if you want to be the best, train with the best, or, you know, be around them. So I couldn't have had any of the success or the career I had without learning from those guys and what they did and what made them successful. And it's no coincidence why they had the careers they had, is because of what they did on and off the ice and how they conducted themselves.
That's amazing to hear that. And like, just for perspective, people here listening, I mean, like, this is a guy who's now played 7 seasons in the NHL, right? And was a captain and around great players, but like, it's not as common as you think. Like, once you see it, right? Like you said, you need to be able to see it and like understand that, holy shit, there's a whole different level to what's happening here. And there's a whole different level for me available, you know, and I talk about that now a lot, is like the standards, the personal standards that we develop. It's crazy where they come from, right? Like, we think we're a hard worker, or we think we're working hard, or we think we're doing the right thing, but our environment matters with that, right? It's like, if you're not ever exposed to Gary Roberts, you might have retired thinking, yeah, man, I was one of those guys that put in all the time and did all the work, right? But now you've seen it, and now it brought out something else in you that you might not have seen otherwise. I think that's such a powerful thing, like, to listen to and to hear. Because find it, right? Find that within you. And my God, I wish I found that guy too. Because I sounds like I was like you, right? I thought, yeah, fuck, I put in my work, right? I did a good job, but I was never really trying to scratch the ceiling on, you know, where Jason could get to, right? And It'd be fun to try and do that. And those guys like you're talking about bring out the best in everybody else, and that's why these teams have success. It's like, no, it's not a secret, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. And I always tell these kids now, I'm like, you got to get out of here. The easy thing to do is go home every summer and be with your buddies and live at home and train with your mom, you know, whatever. Your mom cooks your meals and stuff. That's the easy thing to do. And I did that in my first few years. But then that one year I went to the World Championships with Rob Blake and got to play with him. And this guy's coming off a Norris Trophy. And I put myself out there to him, and he was such a nice guy and stuff. So that following summer, I up and moved to Manhattan Beach in California, and I trained with Rob Blake, Jeremy Roenick, Chris Chelios, and I got out of my comfort zone. I left home for the first time. I started chasing that thing. But even then, I got traded again. There were bumps in the road and stuff, and I didn't really find, you know, that level of preparation or what I needed until I met Robs and Mats and those guys, and they instilled it in me. Like that. Those years I had in Toronto and playing with Thomas Caberlet, who one of the most underrated defensemen of all time, I think. Like, all the success I had is a direct result of playing with that guy for that long. Like, he was, I was the yang to his yin, like he could skate pucks and see the ice and make passes. And I was heavy and physical and could shoot the puck. It was like a perfect combination of stuff. And, I thrived on playing with him and playing with those guys and feeding off of them. But just the leadership qualities that those guys had off the ice and how they brought teams together and showed guys the way and said, jump on my back and I'll take you there type thing is just, the stuff legends are made of. Those guys were awesome.
In your second year, you get see the 20 games. You got to the third round that year, I believe, if I recall correctly. What was that run like? And was it LA that year? Who did you guys? No, who did you lose to that year in the final?
We lost to Carolina in like 3 or 4 overtime games in the conference final. But that was the year that we had. So we opened the playoffs against the Islanders and 7-game series. That was the hardest hockey and most physical series that I was ever involved in my career. It was death. They had that Steve Webb, Eric Karen. Steve Webb was like literally killing people, putting people on stretchers every game in Nassau Coliseum. I've never seen it like it. It was crazy. And we got the crap beat out of us, man. I don't know how we got through it, but we did. We came through in 7 games. We lost Mats. We lost Tux along the way. Mike Pekka blew his ACL. That's when Tux hit him low. It was a fight to the death, and we won that. I don't know how, but we did. And then once again, we meet up with Ottawa, and they got a great team again, 100-plus points. They got Chara, Red, and, all these guys. And they faced their kryptonite again in the playoffs. And we took them 7 games, and we beat them again in 7. And then by the time we got to the third round, like Mats was out for this whole thing. He broke his wrist. And this was the year that Gary Roberts, he was like 38 years old, and he played like he was like 20 years old. Him and Alan McCauley were like, I'd never seen anything like it. That playoff series, Gary Roberts was like a man possessed. He was just killing people, scoring goals. Like, I've never seen anything like it. So we beat Ottawa in 7. And then by the time we got to Carolina, we were so gassed and so drained. And we were on the cusp of winning that series, and we lost 3 games in overtime, just heartbreakers. And Carolina ended up beating us in 6 or whatever. And they went on to Detroit won, or they went on to beat Detroit, or Detroit won, beat them in the final. But that was a great run, man. It was a lot of fun to be around. That was it was great hockey and a great experience, man. It was awesome.
Do you find, like, as far as your memory looking back in your career now, like usually deep runs like really brings teams together and galvanizes them? Like, is that kind of where your sweet spot is as far as like your memory looking back of that group of guys and battling, getting through Islanders and doing those types of things?
Yeah, that was as a team goes and doing what it needed to take to win, and guys stepping up when good players go down. You talk about depth and needing depth. Obviously, you need that to win Stanley Cups, and you need guys to step up and fill those roles. And we had a ton of guys that did that year. Danny Markov was on that team, like guys like him and Yuskevich, blocking shots, the little things like blocking shots with your face, like not even thinking twice about it. I know you played with him. The guy was like a crazy man. But I'm that, those guys, and that run and the camaraderie we had and the success we had was a lot of fun. But I'll tell you what, the one year that I really look at our teams that we had was the year before the lockout. So was that 04? Was that 03?
Yeah, 03, 04.
When we lost to Philly in overtime in game 6. That team that we had that year was on paper one of the best teams ever. Like, I don't know how we didn't win, whatever, have you. But the sad part is that whole team would have been together the next year for a full season. Like, we acquired Brian Leach that year. We had Owen Nolan. We had Newey, Robs, Eddie Belfour, Mats. Like, our team was stacked. And we ended up losing to Philly. Hard-fought series, lost in OT game 6 in the second round. And then the season was canceled the next year. Everyone's contract expired. And the Leafs never made the playoffs for 10 years after that, legitimately. Right. I don't think they've won a playoff round since that year.
Right.
Because, right, they've been in the playoffs, but they keep playing Boston and losing.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I don't think they've won a round since then. It's been that long.
But that was the team. That team was, I'll tell you what, man, we had all a piece to the puzzle. Like, we were tough. We had depth. We had a goalie. We had it all. I really regret that. Like, looking back, that year got flushed down the toilet, that lockout year, because I really think that we would have had a chance to. And the fact that we lost the year before, having that knowledge and then having all the guys come back, sometimes you got to lose to win. And you look at the Oilers and the Islanders. I truly think that looking back, like that's the hole in my stomach that year that we lost because of the lockout, because I really think we had a chance to compete for it all that year.
Yeah, that's tough because it doesn't happen all the time, as you know, right? 1,100 games and you're, like the perfect storm doesn't always happen. And it's too bad that the carpet got pulled from under you guys. That must have been a hell of a time, though. I mean, that's a successful run there for Toronto, right? Like the city was behind you guys, obviously a lot of good players. Boy, it must just even bring a smile to your face just even thinking about those years there. I can imagine what that was like, going through those playoff rounds and being competitive. And like you said, like scoring, you had some years there, man. Like in a little bit of homework I did there. You mean you were up for the Norris the one year, fourth in votes or whatever it was, or third, or you were third in goals to Lidstrom and Zubov. I think that was in 05-06. Like, that's some big names and some big numbers, man. Like, it must have been feeling obviously really good about your game and where you were at on a personal level.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, like I said, I got really comfortable there. I finally felt like I had a home. I had great coaches in Pat Quinn and Ricky Lee, and then later on Paul Maurice, like that believed in me. And obviously great teams. Playing with guys like, how can you not have good numbers? Playing with Cabby and Mats and Alex McGillney and all these guys. Like, just being a part of that and being able to be on the ice with those guys. I was just reaped the benefits of it. It was spectacular.
When so the lockout year, and I mean, it's just a small little blip, but it was just super interesting to see because I didn't even really know anything about it. So you go to Sweden. One, why Sweden? Two, why does it look like it went so bad? And what was that all about?
Here's a little tidbit for you. Okay, so this shows you about like the mental side of the game, right? So the lockout happened, and a lot of guys were playing in Europe. I was not. I had stayed home, was trying to have a baby, whatever. At some point during that lockout, there were whispers that, okay, it might get done. We might be playing in January. Okay. So now I see all these guys playing in Europe, and I'm like, well, I can't not be playing. What if the season does start? I'm not going to be ready. I'm not skating or whatever. So I went over there with the wrong attitude. I was going there out of necessity rather than because I wanted to go over there. So I was going because I didn't want to be behind the eight ball if it started.
Yeah.
So I really didn't want to. I felt like I had to. Sweden, Anders Eriksson. I don't know if you play with Bubba. Do you play with Bubba?
Nope.
So Bubba was a good friend of mine, playing Toronto with him. He had ties to Sweden, knew someone with the HV71 team and said, let's go together. It'll be more fun. We go together. They'll take us both. Let's go play. Let's go get ready. I was like, all right, whatever. Let's go. So went over there. Totally different game. Big ice, not really beneficial for my style of play. And then going over there mentally, not wanting to be there was tough. And then, get there and it's freaking, you don't see the sun. It's like 2 days. You're on the ice morning and night, literally don't see the sun. You go to the rink before the sun's up, you come out, the sun's gone. Start playing, we lose out of the gate, lose every game. So it's miserable. My heart wasn't in it. My game was terrible. It just shows you what mental capacity. If you're not truly invested in something, your game will suck. I was terrible over there. So game whatever, we're like 0-9 or 0-10. So game 10 comes, and the coach is like, barely speaks English, is like, so over there they dress like 8D, but only 6 play. But you actually sit on the bench in your equipment if you're not playing, part of the team. And the coach pulls me aside, like morning skate or whatever. He's like, we're going to switch things up tonight. You're going to be the extra defenseman, and I'm like, excuse me? He's like, yeah, you're going to, we want you to dress and, cheer the guys on and stuff. And I literally looked the guy in the eye. I'm like, if you think I'm going to put my equipment on and cheer the team on, I'm like, you're sadly mistaken. I'll be packing my stuff. And I grabbed my stuff and I left. Probably not the best scenario. I would have done the same thing if I was him, because I was terrible over there, like literally terrible. It was embarrassing. I think I had like 40 minors and like, I was just terrible. I just wasn't invested in it. And it was just a bad situation for me. And I would have done the same thing. I probably didn't handle it the right way, but at the time I just didn't even want to be there. So whatever, I packed my stuff, went home. Yeah. But fast forward now, so it shows you I couldn't play in the Swedish Elite League. I was terrible. And then the next season comes and I go out and have the best year of my life, but leading up to that, obviously excited for hockey to start again. But there's a few things that go into that story. That summer, I told you I was trying to have a baby when I came back from Sweden. We were unsuccessful before I went to Sweden. We were, working on it, wasn't working for whatever reason. I come back, took some time off. It worked. So my wife gets pregnant leading up to the season. She's due that year, right at camp time or whatever. So I was lucky enough to have a baby like September 28th, right before the season started. It was like a dream come true. And everything kind of just took off from there, like with the season. And just, having a kid and, the light of my life and all that stuff, everything just kind of clicked on the ice, at least.
Right. No, that's amazing. And then that was, your contract expired at the end of that year, correct?
Yeah. It was like I said, all about timing, right?
Yeah.
So here we are again. My contract's up. I just happened to put together the season of all seasons at 30 years old, like going to unrestricted free agency for the first time in my life. But I'll tell you a couple other little stories about that year that I don't get into much detail about too much. But so I've told this story at my camp too. So that summer, it's an Olympic year in 2006. And my game had been building, obviously, over the past 5 years or whatever in Toronto. And I basically felt like I belonged in that group of players. So summer comes and they have a summer camp. And they invite 12 defensemen, and I don't get invited. So I'm rattled, for one. Pat's the coach, too, which hurts a little bit, too, because he's my coach. And, not that he had a say in it, because, there's a bunch of people that go into it. So instead of just sitting on my hands and, just taking it, I pick up the phone and I call Steve Tambellini, who's on the board, who I had in Vancouver, who I have a relationship with. And by no means did I call him and ream him out or anything. But I just called him and said, Steve, I said, I just don't understand why, I'm left out of this group. I'm not saying I'm better than anyone in that group of 12. I said, but I think I belong. I think I belong there. And, he gave me the spiel, whatever. There's a lot of good players. And just because you're not in that group doesn't mean you're not going to make the team. But everyone knows, if you don't go to the camp, no one makes the, whatever. No one ever makes the team. So I got that in my head. So literally that whole summer, I'm on, Gary Roberts' program. And, I never mentioned Matt Nickel, who was our strength coach in Toronto during that whole Gary Roberts and Matt Sundin era. Matt's the guy who brought BioSteel. I'm sure you've heard of BioSteel and all that stuff. Matt Nickel's the man behind all that, but he was our strength coach there, and he was my guardian angel for the last 11 years of my career since I met him. One of the best strength coaches out there. I still good friends, still talk to him to this day. He still trains NHL players. I send some of my prospects to him. He is awesome. So he did all my summer training, and I was old enough at that point that after being around Gary and Matt's that I had figured out I didn't need someone to push me anymore. I just needed to know what to do, and I could go do it on my own. I was the guy at the track at 6 a.m. by myself doing my sprints, pulling a sled, and then back at the gym at noon, not having someone tell me to do it, just doing it on my own.
Right.
But that whole summer, all I trained and thought about was like making that Olympic team. I get all emotional. So literally, like I tell the story, like that was my fire, like that whole summer. Like when I trained, I like just pushed myself through 2 days and all that stuff, like literally put everything I had into it. And then fast forward to having a baby. And now I'm really going to get emotional because my wife had like a horrible birth. Like I won't get into like the gory details of it, but whatever. My daughter came out sunny side up and wouldn't come out. We were in labor for 8 hours. They had to pull her out with forceps, whatever. In the process, they, tore my wife in half, basically. A day later in the hospital, she goes to get out of bed and she's paralyzed. Like her right leg is paralyzed. She falls to the floor. So like 2 days later, they just ship her home to me. Season starting. I got a paralyzed wife who has to sit in a SIDS bath for literally almost 2 years. Like no joke. It was mentally and physically. I'll say physically, she wasn't normal again for a solid 2 years. Mentally, times postpartum by a million. When you're paralyzed and you can't even care for your baby, and your husband's going on road trips or whatever.
Wow.
So I got that going on off the ice, and the season starting. Obviously, got to deal with that too. And this speaks volumes to mental preparation and how much of that is actually involved in hockey and sports. And I think it's like frickin' 90% after going through that year, because I was sleeping less. I was up nights because my wife couldn't care for the baby. I'd get home from a game and I'd do the night shift till 4 a.m. because I was wired anyway. And then I go to bed from 4 till 7, get up, go to the rink, practice, come home, take care of the baby again every day. And to have the success I had that year on the ice with all the shit that was going on off the ice just shows you how much I prepared myself that summer because of the Olympic snub thing, that nothing was going to affect how I played on the ice. No matter what was going on, I had mentally prepared myself that whole summer for a goal and a dream I had, and I was going to see it through no matter what was going on. So, long story short, I went out and I forced them to take me on that team. And they had to, and they took, they took me as the extra defenseman or whatever, but whatever. I still made the Olympic team, and I can, go to my grave saying I played in the Olympics and represented my country. And a lot of guys can't say that. But the off-ice stuff that was a year from hell, like literally. But, we got through it, whatever. It is what it is. Makes you stronger in the end.
Oh, that's amazing. So as far as years go then, so that was, what year was that?
05, 06.
That was 05, 06. Right. Cause the Olympics. So you had just come off a real good year. And then that was the year that the Olympics. Yeah. Okay. So then you worked your tail off, and then you actually did get selected to, like, what Tambellini said could happen actually did happen.
Yeah.
And then you ended up playing, correct, too, because you were a reserve, but did Jovo or somebody go out and then you end up getting in?
A couple guys got hurt. So I ended up playing. Like I played every game. I played sparingly, worked the second PP unit and played, spot duty. So I was actually on the ice and on the team and all that stuff. We lost in the quarterfinals, which sucks, but still, just to be a part of that whole experience and get to sit in the Olympic Village with athletes from, 100 different countries and see what they went through to get there and stuff. It was so cool. Just the experience, being a part of that whole thing was, and the list of names on that team, just to be in the same room as those guys was, a dream come true for sure.
Any takeaways from there as far as being in that room with those guys, and, probably majority of them Hall of Famers, I assume. I didn't look at that team. Like, any big takeaways of, or aha moments or wows of being around those guys? And did you ever feel, actually another one, did you feel like, I know you said you wanted to be in that group, right? And that you deserved to be in that group of 12. Did you have any sense of like, holy shit, like I do belong here, or that I don't belong here? Like how did that go?
No, by that point, I felt I belonged there. I think I felt I belonged in that group. But it was just to be around guys, just to see what other guys do and how they prepare for games was just more insight for me. Watching the, Chris Prongers or Adam Foots or, Marty Barrera's on that team, Lou, all these guys that just Joe Sakic, like legends of the game and how they prepare and what they do on the ice and watching them, their demeanors in the locker room and their pregame preparation and stuff like that was just an eye opener. Just to be around all that knowledge and those greats and Hall of Famers was just spectacular.
Yeah, I believe it. Credit to you though, man. Like, man, you got all emotion there. I really appreciate you sharing that. Like that human side of the game is like where I think is, like that's the stuff. You mean, like not many people knew that, I bet. You mean, and here you are wearing a letter for the Maple Leafs and, have this new deal and now you got a new baby and you're the one getting up and, it's like you're still a dude at the end of the day with a family and with a life outside of hockey. And sometimes, fans forget that. And to be the professional, like, and that's where it comes in, right? How do you make it work? How can you do it? Right? Because it's hard. It's hard just trying to figure it out when you're a single guy, let alone when you have people that are dependent upon you and in a situation like that. So it really sounds wild though that you were able to be that successful on the ice with all that emotion and stuff happening off the ice. Do you think how did it come together for you? Was it just like that 3 months of training prior, like that really started to kind of forge the brain that was required to make that happen?
Yeah, I just think that I had trained so hard that summer with such focus that it was just ingrained in me that I was going to be successful that year. Like I knew it. I didn't doubt myself no matter what was going on off the ice, that when I got to the rink, that sanctuary or whatever, I already knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And, the belief in yourself too. I'd finally found a home. I had doubted myself for so many years that, learning to believe in yourself and, trusting it too, not doubting it anymore.
Do you think that the mental, like, so obviously guys focus, and one of the things that I talk about is, okay, like when you train, you're training your body, you're trying to get stronger or quicker, whatever it is you're trying to do. But a lot of guys aren't approaching that in the sense of like, I'm actually training myself mentally. Like, they don't even really get that aspect of that, like that you are making the holistic self of the player better because you're committing to getting up at 6 a.m, because you're committing to be the guy that's going to go back and go do something else again. Like all those little habits, I think, pay dividends. Did you notice it not only the physical aspect of you being a better player because of the time you put in, and also from the mental side? Could you see that happening for yourself?
Yes, and leadership stuff and stuff like that all comes with that. I just felt like more of a pro and, someone guys could look to now instead of being the guy looking at other guys,
right.
And that was ingrained in me from those other players,
That's so awesome.
I didn't mention, like earlier, my short stint in Chicago, I got to play with Doug Gilmour, who was unbelievable, like as a captain and leader, and just the way he approached the game on the ice was like, do or die. Like every game was his last. Like just watching a guy like that, and going back to, I forgot to mention that about like you said, being just wanting to fit in. Remember we spoke about that. I've never seen a leader like Dougie too. Emma, sorry. When I was in Chicago, I was a young kid, and I'd been around the league, but I was still young. And to go to a team I grew up in Calgary, and Doug Gilmour won the Stanley Cup in '89 when I was 13 years old. So obviously, like, are you kidding me? And this guy would pick me up from the rink every day at my house, drive me to the rink every day. He was my chaperone, took me under his wing. Just no questions asked, like went out of his way to do that. Not knowing that I was like in awe of this guy, that I'd grown up watching him and watching him hoist the stand, going to the parade and all that stuff. Like, and just selfless, like just, and then to watch how he approached the games on little guy, like looked like nothing off the ice. And when he got on the ice, it was like played for keeps, man. Like I've never seen it like it. And be around like that. And that, now I felt like being around those guys, those Matses and that now, you know, I felt like I was projecting that, you know, like leadership qualities, you know, where I didn't before. When at 22, I wasn't ready to be a captain. I didn't have those qualities.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted them, but I didn't have them. I didn't have that experience. I didn't have, you know, I didn't jump all in. And now I was at the point where I felt like, yeah, okay, I got it figured out. Okay, now I'm ready. Yeah.
I love that. I love that story because you were a letter in Spokane. I think were you even the captain the one year there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were a captain one year.
Yeah.
You were captain, a letter on the World Junior team, right? An early identified guy at 22 years old to be a captain of an NHL team. So like you are a guy that had leadership capabilities and abilities, and people recognize that. But I love how you talk about even the evolution of your own leadership, like how that goes to different levels and how you need to level that up to truly step into that role in a real way. And that's such a powerful thing. I talk about that confidence that you earn the confidence a lot of times too, right? You earn the right to be able to walk in those shoes and walk through that door and feel like you belong in that room. And doing that stuff off the ice is a lot of times an earmark for that happening, because you can't guarantee the success on the ice, right? I mean, I talk about that a lot too, right? You're going to be the result of being successful on the ice is awesome. But like, how do you feel confident before you've gotten that success?
Yeah.
There's a way to do it, right? And that's what we're talking about, is like really stepping into those scenarios off the ice. I listened to an interview with Martin St. Louis, who you obviously know, and like his story is crazy too. Like he didn't get to the show until 25 or something, and then ended up winning a Hart Trophy and all the other accolades, and now he's in the Hall of Fame. And he talked about like it took him probably 2 or 3 years to think that he actually belonged in the NHL.
Yep.
You know, to believe in himself and to earn the right to be there and to be amongst those guys. And then he became one of the best. And like that, there's a lot of layers to that onion when you talk about the mental side of the game and feeling like you belong, but it's way beyond how good you can stick handle and how well you can skate. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I got to touch on it here before we get into the rest, but like things ended up going south as far as like from the fans' perspective with you, and they're notoriously hard on guys and their team, sometimes rightfully so and sometimes not. Like where did that happen? How did that start? Like I'm looking at your stats, I'm like, my God, why would they ever got on this guy's back? But like, break that down in your perception of what happened there.
Well, things started to fizzle. Obviously, we missed the playoffs. It was a comedy of stuff. You know, the one year we missed the playoffs by 1 point. The next year we missed the playoffs by like 3 points. And then obviously Paul Maurice came in. You know, Pat got fired. Paul Maurice came in. Fergie came in. I had the big contract, obviously. Still had decent numbers, but the game had lacked some consistency, I'd say, because the team did not have success. We didn't make the playoffs. A lot of, obviously, expectations. And, you know, Toronto's a tough place to play. And like I said, everyone should experience it. Although I had 7 successful years, the last year was death. Like, it was hell for me. I scored that OT winner on my own team in Buffalo in it was like game 6 of the regular season, like a nothing game. You would have thought it was like the Stanley Cup final. And from that point on, that year was a disaster. It was just every time I touched the puck on home ice, I got booed. I couldn't go anywhere. You know, you go to the movies, people are like heckling you. You go to the grocery store, you get heckled. My house is getting egged. I'm getting hate mail.
Come on.
Oh, buddy, it was so bad. It was so bad. It was so hard. It sucked the life out of the fun of the game for me. Like, it literally, like, I had always been a guy that loved going to the rink and loved playing, just loved being around the boys, loved the competition. And that year was so trying mentally. It just took my love for the game away. And, you know, you can't perform if you can't hold it together. It was so hard on me.
That's
and then
amazing.
Obviously that summer came around. You know, they fired Fergie. They brought in Cliff Fletcher to clean up the mess. And Cliff wanted to trade everyone. We all had no move trade clauses, and no one would waive them. And so we all hung around. And then I remember my exit meeting with Cliff at the end of the year. He just called me in, sat me down, and said, I think it'd be best for you and the organization if you played somewhere else next year. Think about it. I'll call you in a couple weeks. And by that point, I had succumbed to the fact that, yes, if I want to continue playing hockey, it's got to be somewhere else because it just isn't going to work here. And I needed a fresh start somewhere. So for me, it worked out that Florida was very interested. And it was like a breath of fresh air coming down here, you know, just being away to get away from the game, you know.
Right.
You know, come to Florida, drop off into obscurity and just have fun again.
Yeah. Like,
so I came down here and I was just Bryan. Like, you know, no one knew who I was. I could go anywhere I wanted, do whatever I wanted. And I got that spark back and had fun and, you know, had 3 fun years down here. Became captain in Florida too, which is another honor, and got to do it again, do it the right way. And it was great. I love my time in Florida. It was fun.
Yeah, that's wild, man. What a story. And I can't, so that was kind of the turning point, that OT, that 4-3, you're trying to clear a puck in front for all those. I mean, I didn't really remember it, and I had to find it here going in, but yeah, it's 4-on-3 overtime. You're killing the penalty. It's a rebound, and you're trying to clear the puck. It goes off the inside of the post all the way across and just barely squeaks across the line, but it's an own goal, and you guys lose. But I mean, like,
it was kind of a rolling puck, and I just, you know, I knew there wasn't much time left, and I was just trying to hack it to the corner, and when I hit it, it went right off the inside post, off the other post, and in, like with like one or whatever. And then it was just, I think I was on the front page of the paper for like 3 days. Bryan McCabe, like, it was just craziness, man.
Right. And then just from there, it just kept steamrolling and gained momentum. And
even like, I tried to rein it back in, and I'll tell you what, man, like Paul Maurice was so good to me through that tough day. He knew how hard I was having it. And he was so good to me, trying to put me in situations to make me successful again and get my confidence back. And it just seemed like every time I gained like momentum and try to get it back, then I'd like throw a pizza up the middle, like play great for 58 minutes, throw a pizza up the middle, goal. And then it was like, we're right back to where I couldn't put it all together. Right. It was like, it was done. But I'll tell you what, he was so good to me during that time. Like, you know, we'd have closed door meetings and it'd just be like, buddy, you know, what can I do to, you know, like, he was so good to me.
Right.
Like, it was just a tough time. I just couldn't mentally get over it. And then I got hurt and I broke my hand, and I missed like the most I'd ever missed in a season. I think I missed like 30 games. I shattered my hand. It just seemed like an accumulation of stuff.
Yeah.
My time had run its course there, as did a bunch of us.
That listening to your stories and like the stuff that you remember and the stuff that you like talking about, it seems again like, so there's Paul Maurice who's making an impact because he's treating you like a human and not a hockey player, right? Doug Gilmour picking you up at the house, you know, like these, you know, Brian Burke talking to you beforehand about getting traded and letting you know so you can be prepared. Like, is that wild? Like, to me, that's the part that makes a difference. Like, it really does. And you can make a difference. And, I assume that you're using that now with the guys that you're working with. Do you try and treat them like people and not, you know, just hockey players, because that human side seems like you can really make a difference with guys.
Absolutely. That's the most important part. It's no coincidence all those people stayed in hockey a long time or are still playing hockey. You know, there's great players out there, but if you're a good person and a marginal player and do the right things, you're going to have a career. You're going to get by. Look at, like, you never see any real complete assholes have 20-year careers for the most part. Yeah. It's a rarity. Those bubble guys that are assholes, they don't last because teams don't sign them and they fizzle out. You know, if you're a good teammate and a leader and you're willing to put your ego aside and do what you got to do on and off the ice, or be a good teammate and stuff, those guys stick around. They have careers. They have, you know, I used to, one guy I'll say to you that it's about adapting too. Like, you got to be willing to take on a certain role and stuff. Like I said, you're not going to be their top 6 forward. I'll use a guy I played with in Toronto as an example, Matt Stajan.
Yep.
Great guy, young kid, came to the Leafs when we were like in our prime as a young kid out of the OHL, you know, found his niche, got in there, played some games, you know, had a good career, got traded to Calgary, kind of reinvented himself, took on a lower role, best faceoff guy, PK guy, mentor to young guys. Freaking guy got 1,000 games in the NHL. reinvents himself, stuck around, took on a fourth line role. You know why he stuck around? Because he's one of the best humans I've ever met. And a leader and a guy that puts other people in front of him, takes guys under his wing. Those are the guys that stick around. Those are the guys that have careers and make a living out of this. Yeah. And those are the guys that stick around in hockey afterwards too. You know, it's no coincidence. So yeah. I definitely preach that to these kids. More importantly than any of the skill stuff, it's more of the people thing and the human side of the game. And, you know, put yourself in their shoes and how they would feel if they came in and no one talked to them or whatever, you know, like a Euro coming over and doesn't speak English, you know. Yeah. Put yourself in their shoes going over to Russia and not being able to speak the language and no one on your team talks to you. Like, you know, it's a big thing.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. Well, and the relationships between two, like the players that you're trying to get to the NHL and even yourself, you know, like sometimes there's so many different levels of relationships within that game, right? It's your teammates that you want to be good. You want to be a good teammate for your teammates. I personally, I never had an issue with that. I mean, I love that team aspect of the game and like being together with the guys. But then you have like the relationship with the trainers. That's another level. There's a relationship with the coaches, which is another level. There's a relationship with maybe the higher up guys that sometimes if you get to interact with them, like, you know, it is a relationship game. Guys gotta care about you and you got to give them reason to. And I think finding a way to be authentic with that is a challenge sometimes, right? To be who you are and let that stand out. And I love that you had this whole career arc of like starting as a captain, you know, and you had a letter for most points in your career, but I mean, having that letter, that C at 22, and then you end up with it again in Florida in a completely different headspace at a completely different age. And obviously with a completely different understanding of what it meant to wear that letter. You know, can you describe yourself as a captain in Florida and were you still that guy that learned how to really work out and take things to another level like you did that Olympic year?
Yeah. You know what? Like at that point in time, I was older and I wasn't the same player I was back in Toronto, but I'd figure out the leadership part of it. And I'm really genuinely humbled that I got a chance to do it again, because I know I didn't do a great job when I was 22. So to have that opportunity again in Florida with a young group of players and be the guy that tried to pull the group together and show them the right way and what it took to be a pro was an honor. I loved it. I love being a captain. I loved being that guy that was a voice in the room and, you know, tried to be enthusiastic every day of my life. And I lived for it. Honestly, it was fun.
That's amazing. Yeah. I've had the discussions offline before, like with that whole, like the magnitude of being a captain and how it seems like it's the thing to do with these young draft picks. Now you get a whoever, an Eichel or a McDavid. And I know these guys have been around the league a little bit longer now, but they give them this C, like the C, like at such young ages sometimes. And it's just like, I just hold my breath with those guys. It's like, man, like let them learn how to be a player. And I don't care what type of person they are, but like to really be a captain of an NHL team at that age, like to know how to do it is so hard. And like, it's such a small little window there. And if the wrong guy's wearing the C too, and not saying that Connor McDavid's the wrong guy to wear the C, but you know what I mean? Like if it's not the guy, you know, that's a tough thing to win around too. How do you feel about that? Like you said, you shouldn't have had it at 22. Like, do you think anyone should have it at 22?
Yeah, it depends on their personality and their demeanor or their confidence or their maturity level. You know, certain guys can handle it. I obviously couldn't. It is a lot of pressure, though. It is. Whether you think it is or isn't, when you get that letter put on your chest, it's an honor and it's a responsibility to the city, the team, the organization, the people, the fans, the group. And it takes a special person to do that. And I've been with good ones and bad ones. And right. You just kind of learn along the way, you know?
No, it's so crazy. And we're going, I told you we would do this. Like, it's impossible not to talk and just go. And we're barely even into what you're doing now. And I want to respect your time, Caber. So I'll ask you just a couple questions about what you're doing now. Right. So now you're helping young guys get to the next level. What, can you sort of describe your role and what the philosophy is within the Panthers of how to go about doing that? And I'll preface just with one thing, because we all know how important player development is now. It's one of the biggest aspects of being successful in the NHL with the salary cap. I mean, if you can't develop your own players, the draft is one thing, but you have to now be able to get them to be in the NHL. So for you to be responsible for that is a big deal. And what is your approach, and what is the approach of the Panthers in doing that?
Yeah, so basically I run all the player development here. I've been doing that for, God, man, I think this might be my 8th or 9th year with the team. So I've kind of worked my way up the ladder here. But it is very important, like you said, especially in the cap world. You got to develop from within. So the scouts do all the hard work. They're in the rinks every day, 28 days a month, watching these players. And essentially, once we draft a player, it's my responsibility, along with the AHL coaches and my assistant, Mike Ryan, to A, teach these kids what it takes to be a pro, and B, hopefully help them get there and be able to realize that dream that I was able to do. And there's going to be bumps in the road, and I'm going to be there shoulder to cry on, and I'm going to be there to kick them in the ass when they need it too. More importantly, just help them become a good human off the ice too. I think that's the most important thing. A lot of these guys are kids, and have been, moms made them breakfast and folded their clothes, and their billets have done everything for them, and all of a sudden they're leaving home at 20 years old to turn pro and living in Springfield, Mass. And it's a whirlwind. So I'm there to help them get through that and help them become a professional and mature on and off the ice, and learn to live, and just life skills in general. And my dream is that they all get to do it. That's a sad truth that not everyone's going to be able to get there, but I'm going to try my best to help these kids get there.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. And I mean, even talking about that, the off ice stuff, right? Like there we go back to the person side of it, right? Like sometimes we got to take care of that person side and develop that so they can become a better player. And I do see the benefits of that with what I do. And I think we have an interesting perspective on it now being fathers, right? I think that actually probably helps what you're doing, because you see the responsibility of being a dad within your own 3 kids, right? Raising them and understanding that, like what makes them tick, going back to Brian Maxwell, like each one of those guys ticks a little different. How do you reach them? How do you get the most out of them? How do you get them to believe and trust you that that's what your intention is, right? Like there's so many nuances to that, and having the ability to kind of hone that craft as a dad, I'm sure helps you in working with the players.
Well, you touch on the human side, and that's the biggest thing that, like, when we get to hold this, it's one thing to go see a kid play on the weekend and talk to him after a game and stuff, but do you really get to know the kid in that short time? No. So the best part of my year is when we have our development camp, and I'm around these kids 24/7 for 5 or 6 days. You get to see their personalities, who's the leaders, who's the clowns, who's the introvert. What does make them tick? Because they're all not the same. You can't give the same speech to every kid. You got to go at kids in a different way. They're all going to react differently to different types of self-motivation. So it's a matter of finding out and unlocking what does make each personal individual tick, and trying to help them achieve that and figure it out for themselves and get there. It's not easy, but it's fun. They're all different kids, and some kids are at college, some are juniors, some are Euros, but the fun part is getting to know them and hopefully getting inside their heads and helping them learn to, prepare their bodies and their brains for, the upcoming roller coaster of their life. It's, like I tell them all, it's not easy. It's not easy. It's going to be a whirlwind, but we're all here in this organization to help you get there, and we'll do whatever possible. You guys got to be willing to put the time in and ask questions and be a sponge and all that stuff.
Yeah, I remember when we talked about, maybe it would be a month ago now, and we were speaking a little bit about this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it was like when I asked you, like, what's the biggest thing you're working on with these guys, and to paraphrase, you're like, well, these guys are so talented now, like they are so skilled, and they come kind of ready, but like you said, you found yourself working with them mostly on stuff like away from the rink, like that was where most of your time is spent, with like the life skills and the preparation. And do I remember that conversation accurate? Is that a true depiction of what's going on?
Yeah, like life skills in general. Like we at Dev Camp, we do cooking classes, we do mental stuff, we do nutrition, we obviously do now we do sleep stuff for, your body's got to get the right rest, and you got to do this stuff. Cool downs. What the hell was a cool down when we played? Nothing. All these life skills, like just everything that goes into being a human being. But now with social media and all this stuff, it is a different time, and to have conversations with kids, like some kids they're easy to text with, but They can't look you in the eye and have a conversation with you. It's like pulling teeth. So trying to unlock that box is half the battle now.
Right.
These kids are so ingrained in technology and their phones, whereas we didn't have that stuff. You were forced to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And just try to, I don't know if I'm old school, but bring back the human side, that camaraderie, that team mentality, that's going above and beyond and getting to know the guy next to you and wanting and caring about that guy when you're in the locker room is a big part of the puzzle, I still believe in.
Yeah. I don't think that goes away. And I think the teams that are still doing it well are getting that part right, you know. But it is hard. I can imagine the challenge because you're dealing with a generation of athletes now that have been like, they've grown up around this. I mean, that's all they've kind of known. And some of those social skills, in our eyes, you know, older guys would be lacking, right? And for them, it's like it's their peers and what they're used to. But I think to be successful as a group, you gotta hone that. So yeah, I can imagine trying to teach those skills. Are you on a more of an organizational kind of structure side? Do you get involved then? You're helping these guys become better athletes and find a way for them to wear the Florida Panther jersey. Are you involved in the discussions about who actually does get the call or who is going to get moved up, or is it your job just strictly to prepare and somebody else makes the decision?
Yeah, no, like I said, I started in the development side of things, and now I'm still running all the player development stuff, but now I'm like director of player personnel. So I'm a lot more involved in all aspects of the team now, which is fun. You know, I've been very fortunate to have a great mentor here in Dale Talon who took me under his wing, and I've been able to, over the course of the last 8 years, sit in on every meeting, pro, amateur, trade, deadline, everything. So now I'm to the point that, yeah, I'm in conversations about with the coaches from the AHL and the assistant GM, Eric Joyce, about, you know, who does get called up, who's playing the best, how can we help our team now?
Right.
I make my own draft list now. I sit in on all the Zoom draft combine meetings. I'm a lot more heavily involved in a little bit of everything. You know, I'm just trying to better myself and learn about what goes into putting a team on the ice. I'm really intrigued by that. You know, what goes into building a team and stuff. The development stuff's been fun, but I'm definitely intrigued by all aspects of putting an actual winning team on the ice now. And it's been fun to be a part of all these meetings and gain all the knowledge and be able to actually have a say in the matter now is a lot more fun, obviously.
That's pretty wild. So you're actually part of have something to do with the draft selection process and who's being taken. When you went through it, I went through it, like as far as those questions that you're talking about, you know, like that you're getting asked, what would be important, or what would you be trying to get out of what are you trying to identify from a player when you'd be asking them questions before selecting them?
Character, self-motivation, maturity, and passion. Those would be my things. Put the skill aside. If you have someone that wants it, believes in himself, mature, self-motivated, doesn't need you to hold his hand the whole way, I think you've got some keys to success there for sure moving forward. And like I touched on before, like I don't know if anyone that I didn't know this when I played as a player. We just play. You don't even know what goes into making a team. But now being around this and seeing the amount of work that the amateur and pro scouting staff, the time that these people put in, the time away from their families, the road trips, the hotels, the crappy cities and countries they go to, I did not have any appreciation for that part of a hockey team until I actually stepped foot in these guys' shoes and to see what they do. I cannot tell you how hard the amateur and pro scouts work on a daily basis. And, you know, like I said, over the past couple of years, I've kind of expanded my role and got a little more involved, and I build my own draft list. But, you know, to say the least, my say is like a minuscule part of what goes on. Like if I see a guy play three times this year, our scout has seen him play 15 times, you know, like the amount of work that these guys do is just amazing. And I don't think anyone really knows or appreciates what they do, because I never thought about when I played. I guess I just never even thought about it. You know, the scouts would come to training camp, be like, whatever. But now that I'm on the other side and I see what these guys do, and I've been on some road trips with these guys, the stuff they go through in snowstorms and micro towels on the road and black and white TVs. It's I have a new appreciation for actually like these guys, and then eventually down the road, some of these guys make it. You win a Stanley Cup with this guy as your captain, and this guy that slept in a frickin' his car for 2 days to watch this guy play in high school it's crazy. He had a big hand in it. It really, a lot of stuff goes into putting a team on the ice rather than us just lacing up the skates and playing. Yeah. It's crazy to me.
No, and it gives you a greater appreciation for for that mechanism right around you and behind you. And that's good that you talk about that now, because I think it is good for players to know that, it makes you, again, more appreciative. It makes you more grateful. It makes you a better human, treat people better. I mean, all these things, because as you said way back at the beginning of our conversation, you kind of, a lot of us had this trajectory of being the best and being told how good you are and having this type of a lifestyle that can make you unappreciative and a little bit complacent, right? Or whatever the right word is. So the more you connected to these people that are making these things work, it helps. And in my conversation with Ken Holland, we talked about the draft and kind of how that works. And he was quite transparent in saying, once you get out of kind of the second, third round, it's usually the area scouts from there. He's like, I can't see everybody. This is what I pay them. This is why I trust them, so like, and how many guys, if you can get that diamond in the rough, like a Datsyuk or a Zetterberg in the 5th or 6th round, right? Like, wow, I mean, you're a part of that Stanley Cup championship for sure. Right.
Really?
Yeah, that's really wild. Well, Caber, I'm going to let you go because I know we could do this all day, and we're not going to do it all day. But what an amazing guest! Thanks for being so honest. Touching back on your wife, maybe she went on to have 2 other kids. You guys have a family of 3 now, right? So
So my wife, I have 3 kids. Stevie, my oldest girl, is soon to be 15. Jocelyn, my second daughter, is 12, and Lincoln, my son, will be 9 next month. My wife is, like I mentioned before, she teaches at my kid's school, and she is in the process of getting her doctorate degree next summer. So it'll be Dr. Roberta McCabe and Lose Her Husband will be our Christmas cards. Starting after that. But
that's awesome. Well, good. But she's back in good health. I mean, obviously healthy family, and she's back on her feet. And
yeah, no issues. Life is good, man. 3
that's
healthy
awesome,
kids.
man. That's so amazing.
Couldn't be better.
That's great. Well, once again, thanks so much. Let's continue this conversation offline for a second, but we'll stop the record button. Really appreciate everything today. So much good stuff for the young guys out there. I mean, it's an evolution, and it's a personal evolution, not just an athletic evolution. And I think you did a great job of explaining that. So thanks so much, Caber.
All right, bud. Anytime. Thanks, Podsy.
Cheers. Thank you once again for being here today and for listening to that episode with Bryan McCabe. Caber, if you're listening, thank you so much for your time. What an awesome way to connect, and what an amazing way to give back and to share your story as you did, being so transparent with your successes and the adversity and the failures and the things that we learn from and can grow from. And for the listeners to hear that from somebody like you that was able to play 1,100 games in the NHL for lots of different teams, and to be able to be a leader on those teams and understand what it's like to walk in those shoes and to play in those skates. I thank you for that. And for all of you out there, I've had lots of comments about, what speaking about your clients, what are you doing? How are you helping? And so I guess I can answer that here. I am helping mentor athletes on an individual level in a private client scenario to help them realize their potential and become the best hockey players they can be, and to navigate this journey that they're on. And I approach that from a mentor aspect and from a mindset aspect. I really do know and believe that the biggest differentiator right now in today's game is how we can handle our thoughts and our mind and our approach to the game to make sure that we are aligning our thoughts and actions with our goals and dreams of where we want to get to. So that's one thing I do now, amongst speaking and some other things. So if you want to find out more about me on a personal level and what I do, that can all be found at Up My Hockey, which is www.upmyhockey.com. That's the website that talks about me. It shows all the episodes of the podcast. It talks about my services and my story. So for those of you curious, that's where you can find out more about me outside of this podcast. So once again, thank you so much for listening today. And until next time, play hard and keep your head up. Cheers.